one of the things that I interpret throughout the book is the need to build connection with
Right.
our children before we can attempt to do any kind of support, any kinds of behavioral shift, and so on. So I want you to talk to us about the importance of that connection, because I think some parents are just, this behavior is irritating. My child is failing school. I'm constantly being called by the principal, and they're losing friends and all. This needs to work right now. We
Right.
don't have the time for that kind of connectivity. Can you speak about the importance of setting that as a foundation? They want to solve the big issue first without looking at how they can change it long term through
Right.
a simple
Right.
thing as connection. So, can we speak about that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I am certainly sympathetic, empathetic to all parents when your kids are not doing well, when school's a mess or friendships are a mess.
Mhm.
You're like, oh my gosh. And when our kids are struggling and when they're stressed, it's stressful for us. And so we have a natural tendency to want to jump in and start solving things. It's just how we're wired, in part because we talked about in this self-driven child, a low sense of control is so stressful to the nervous system, and doing something as a parent feels better, even if it's not working, to jump in. And so I've been there, I've done that. I'm certainly, there aren't the only perfect parents are people who don't yet have children. So, I've
So
made
true.
my own made my own mistakes as well. But part of the reason we lean in this close connection, I mean, there are a bunch of pieces to it, but one of them is this, particularly in light of COVID, if there is a silver bullet that protects children and their developing brains against the ravages of chronic or traumatic stress, it's having a close connection to one or more adults. And,
Yeah.
and the science on this is robust. Simply put, adversity with support becomes resilience, and
Yes.
adversity without support, that's trauma. So when we were writing this book, and by the way, I stole that from Tina Payne Bryson, who you may know from the Whole Brain Child. She's lovely.
Yes.
When we were writing this book, we did all these focus groups with teens and young adults and some older kids, and asked them, whom do you feel closest to in the world? And sometimes it was mom or dad, but sometimes it was my aunt, my uncle, my grandma, my coach, my teacher, my friend, cousin. And we said, well, what about them that makes you feel close to them? And they said, well, they listen to me without judging me, and they don't tell me
Mm.
what to do all the time. And
Yes.
so one of the things, the reason we want this close connection is, one, to be this kind of stress sponge, to have kids have someone to run to rather than running away from parents because they feel their parents are going to judge them or criticize them or get upset with them. And two, because parents know more about what is good for their kids and they understand them better than anyone on the planet, we want kids to run to them for help. And the way that they feel, because we say to kids, sweetheart, you can tell me anything. And then we tend to start telling them what to do and judging them, right? And so we really want to emphasize this connection. And from a brain perspective, as people don't know, the prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved part of the brain, executive functions, organizing, planning,
Mm.
decision making, problem solving, mental and emotional flexibility, the ability to put things into context, kind of important stuff to like do school, friendships, life,
Right.
as opposed to the amygdala, the threat detecting part of the brain that doesn't think, it simply reacts to threat. And so, if we do things well, we don't excite our kids' stress response. And then their brains are open to the advice, to the wisdom, to the guidance that we want to offer. But if they feel like we're controlling them and telling them what to do, and it excites their stress response, then it's like whoosh, shields down. And we're not talking prefrontal cortex to prefrontal cortex. And our kids they're defensive and they avoid us and they simply can't hear the things that we want to say. So we start the first chapter of the book is about empathy and validation so that we can establish this close connection, but also so that we can then be effective in sharing whatever wonderful advice it is we want our kids to hear.
But so I hear the need for connection and the importance of prefrontal cortex communicating with prefrontal cortex, right?
Right.
And parents, children in particular, not really wanting to talk to parents because they're going to go into the advice immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to talk about two things: how we can build that kind of connection, maybe some one or two tips that
Yeah,
parents
yeah,
can
yeah.
start to look
Yep.
at, but
Yep.
also you hear your child suffering, struggling, but they don't want you to jump in and help.
Nope.
What do you do? Because you want to maintain the connection, but if you butt in too much and give too much advice, then
Mm-hmm.
the child, as you said, connection, those who they feel close to, is because they are heard by that person.
Right,
So
right,
how do you become that parent who hears the child without having to jump in and solve the problem?
right,
So
right.
how do we create a connection, and then how do we resist
Sure.
providing that kind of support when they don't need it?
Well, to begin with, we want to keep in mind that it's not logic that calms hard feelings.
Right.
It's not logic. It's feeling understood. So we have an acronym in that first chapter called SURE, and so SURE. So S is stay calm, in part because when we react and get upset, our kids will react as well. When our amygdala's flaring, they'll feel it even if we don't say a darn word. So we want to, as much as we can, stay calm, and that might be this conversation. You can feel yourself getting and you say, boy, this is an important issue. Let me take 5 minutes and think about this and clear my head, and I'll come right back, I promise. So have that conversation when you're calm. So one, stay calm. Two, you want to understand. And so we want to seek to understand it. And so this is where you're using empathy and validation. You're trying to understand the other kid's perspective, and so you're inquisitive. You're curious about their experience. You're not inquisitorial, like trying to pin them down. And one of the tools that, and the R is reflective listening. There's reflective
Right.
listening is one of the core attributes of all psychology, and it's simply repeating back to people as best you can what you think they said. We borrowed a term from a guy named Ron McGinn who talks about wigging, W-I-G, which stands for what I got is. And so,
Okay.
you can imagine a kid comes home and they're like, oh, I did terribly on the test. And after all the time I studied, I can't believe it. And Mr. Johnson put things on the test. They weren't even saying we're going to be on there, right? And you're sitting, study, pal. Dude, you're on your phone for like 6 hours after watching the football match. Give me a break, right? Or you start jumping into it's like, oh, come on, pal. It's only one test. I'm sure you'll have another one. But both of those things feel invalidating. I'm either
Right.
starting telling you, if you'd done this, you wouldn't be in this position, you dope, or you shouldn't be feeling the things that you're feeling. It isn't reasonable to be this upset about one test. And both of those shut kids down. So what reflective listening does, the wigging is. So let me just repeat this back, make sure I understand this. So what you feel is that you felt like you studied really hard for that test and it didn't go well. The
Mhm.
validation part is, gosh, yeah, I'd be frustrated by that too. Note, I didn't agree with his facts. I
Yes,
didn't
yes.
say, I saw you study a lot, and Mr. Johnson was so unfair. I said, boy,
Mhm.
I'd be upset too if I felt like I studied really hard and the test didn't go well, or if I wanted to do really well and I felt the test was unfair. And that's where ideally a kid says, well, yeah, or that's right, I just madness, and you're trying to do this to calm hard emotions because, and then the last thing is explore options, right? Explore solutions. Because, one thing you asked earlier is we feel as parents that we need to solve things for our kids. How are we going to fix this? But in a perfect world, by helping kids calm their emotions and bringing that, put things in perspective part back online, that solve your own problems part back online, we calm our kids' brains and they then can, sit there, whether then or 10 minutes later and say, maybe I could have studied a little bit more. They're much more likely to acknowledge because just in that moment they're upset and they're just spinning and they're angry, and so that's not the time to point out to them. But you can later, once they heard and understood, say, I wonder if do you think it would help? I have a thought on that. Would you like to hear it? And so once they've come down, we offer suggestions. I've got an idea. Can I run it by you? Would it help you if we offer support? And again, we do this in a kind of tentative way, which I know drives some people crazy. But
Yes.
this is the way, because we get buy-in. Because as we talk about in Self-Driven Child, we really are going to be much more effective if we approach our kids as from the perspective of kind of consultant, right? The homework consultant, not the police, not their boss, not the manager, where it's thinking that it's our job to make our kid do whatever. Because if you think that that's going to work long term, oh, are you in for a world of hurt? Little kids will go for it long enough, but at some point
The
they start.
teenagers.
They hide, they deceive, they don't tell us the truth. I remember my son.